Hi, everyone. This is Carrie Wise, and I'm joined with my colleague, Matt Jones, and we're here for Industry Insider. This is a show we do every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, and we want to interview the movers and shakers in the automotive industry, specifically focused on automotive retail. Matt, why don't you give them a little more background on the show?
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt. So glad that you're watching with us today. Industry Insider is one of the things that we are most proud of here at TrueCar. Carrie's been in automotive for over 20 years. I've been in automotive for close to 20 years. And we both love auto, just like everybody at TrueCar does. But this platform gives us an opportunity to just bring on, as Carrie said, some of the industry's best and brightest and give them a platform to share some of the things that are making the industry move and some of the things that are making the industry work with other people in automotive. And so we love having this opportunity to just talk, act as a think tank and bring the auto industry a little bit closer together. And especially when we have opportunities to do it with people like we have today, which is a very special treat.
Yeah, and speaking of sharing, make sure to share this. In fact, Matt, make sure you share it with your audience. I'm going to do it myself as well on the TrueCar Certified Dealer channel, but share it with everybody you know. We want to make sure that we expose this show and the insights and the best practices with as many people in the automotive industry. So share this. And also just want to point out that if you want to watch this show later or watch other industry insider shows, you can go to our dealer blog at truecar.com/dealer blog. We also have other articles, infographics, and insights that you can get on the dealer blog. So check that out. And Matt, without further ado, let's introduce our guest.
Today, we have somebody very, very special with us. His name is Damon Lester, and he is the president of NAMAD, the National Association for Minority Automobile Dealers. It seems appropriate in this time as everybody's looking to ways to really address the conversations of equality, inequality, wealth, race, everything. We said, we want to be a part of this conversation, and who better to talk to than Damon Lester. And for those of you who know NAMAD, we won't have to introduce, but for those of you who don't, I want to tell you what they're here for. And their purpose is to increase the number of minority-owned dealerships and communities across America. They want to support minority engagement in automotive retail sales and automotive retail service departments. And so we are so thrilled to have one of the pillars of automotive industry in our show right now, Damon Lester, and let's just bring him on.
There he is. Damon
Lester, thank you for making the time to be with us today. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Amen. No one ever introduced me like that, man. That was on point.
Well, I got to say that I consider you family. We haven't known each other very long, but I consider you family. And I think anybody who meets you immediately feels a warmth about you. You're very intelligent. You're very sharp and professional, but you have that quality of being able to make people feel comfortable too. Like I can go to the barbecue with you.
That's right.
And let my hair down. So I love that about you. But I gotta tell my NAMAD story, because I have to admit to the audience that I've worked in the industry for 20 plus years. I've been at TrueCar for a number of years, but last year was my very first NAMAD. And I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew it would be good. I had heard good things. But there's nothing like experiencing NAMAD. And it was like nothing I had ever experienced, not only as a speaker, but everything that NAMAD brought to the table, from the speakers to the content, and even more importantly, the networking. And I have never been to a conference and learned so much, but also had so much fun.
Yeah.
So Damon, tell me about NAMAD and what it's all about before we jump into you and your career.
Well, Carrie, thank you. And yes, you are definitely family. And I don't know why I didn't meet you over my 20 years at NAMAD. I don't know what happened with that, but we're here today. And Matt, welcome to the family.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So yeah, NAMAD is now we're a nonprofit that is this year celebrating its 40th year anniversary. And as Matt, as you mentioned, we represent ethnic minority car dealers. That's African American, Asian, Latino, and Native American. And we advocate for the increase of number of minority-owned new car dealerships in the country. Although that's my primary job, I also do a lot with policy at both the federal and state level, and also work with every manufacturer and all key automotive stakeholders, such as TrueCar, who's a vendor and a supporter of the association, to bring best practices to assist our dealers to become more profitable and efficient.
Amazing.
What more could we ask for? You know, representation and to be better, more efficient, glad you are here. Now, I got to ask something though, because I feel like I got left out. I didn't get to go to NAMAD last year, and because of circumstances and the environment that we live in now, I feel confident saying there's no NAMAD this year. It was supposed to have been in June. So what's the plan going forward?
So unfortunately, due to COVID, we had to cancel a live or a face-to-face conference that we typically would have. So we've actually been going virtual since April, once the COVID was announced. So we do a virtual webinar series or convention series that we've been doing since April, and just providing the NAMAD flavor. But we've been able to extend our footprint to invite more people who actually haven't been to a NAMAD, really experience us and what we've been able to do. And I think for us, as Carrie can attest to, we are like a melting pot. When you come, you have a little bit of every ethnicity. You have non-minority people, but it is the feel that we try to present to our attendees is like you're at home, you're at a family reunion, and whether you know each other or you don't, you are always welcome with the association. And it just to top it off on how we bring forth our speakers, like Carrie killed it last year during the general session, and different speakers that we've been able to put forth in front of folks. Like I think last year we had Reggie Jackson come speak, and just some other, non-industry people who we bring to the table just to make people think outside of our own little microcosm. So that's probably one of our little secret sauces, I would say, that we do a pretty decent job with.
So tell us about you. Tell us about your career. Where did you start, and how did you end up being the president of NAMAD?
Boy, that's needing me to start laying on the couch. So well, I am originally from Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, graduate of Temple University. I am a CPA. I worked in public accounting for a lot of years. One, I was working in the public accounting firm. I was an auditor, and I did a lot of audits, all of my audits overseas. So all of the former Soviet Union countries I've worked in, and from Afghanistan to the Ukraine to Kazakhstan to Georgia, I've been able to, have some experience working overseas. And right after 9/11, I got burnt out, and it's a little crazy for an African-American person to be overseas during that time. And I told the partner of the firm that, hey, I got to go. And he gave me the blessing, and we talked about and strategized what the role would be and what my next life would be as far as my career. And NAMAD was looking for a vice president of operations during that time in 2001, 2002. And I was hired originally as vice president of operations. I worked under my predecessor was the late Sheila Vaden Williams, who was the leader of the association during that time. And in 2006, I was appointed president. And so I came on board right before the recession started to hit. And so as president, right before the recession started to hit. And so I think what we've been able to do, prior to me, we were still in our silo of this minority diversity silo. And after that, once I took over, I think I've done a pretty decent job expanding our footprint from not necessarily always focusing on the diversity piece, but we are also industry influencers as a whole. So I do all of the testifying before Congress and the Senate, and I do a lot with fuel economy standards, CFPB, and anything you named at the both federal and state level from a policy standpoint. We pretty much have a footprint in it, and we work at it.
Wow. I got to say, I had to write a couple things down that I did not know about you. So the first one was a CPA, which shocked me, but also intimidated me. Because, the accountants and me, we get along somewhat, but, they're a little, they're like the lawyers, they're just a little intimidating. So, and then the Soviet Union, like I had no idea. So I had no idea you worked internationally. So that's fascinating, from there to president of NAMAD. What a background.
Yeah, I do not do anything with accounting anymore.
Are you trying to make me feel better?
Yeah, that was the former life, because you're right. They look at accountants as like going to the dentist. So no one likes to deal with them. But yeah, I've been blessed with the career and kind of been able to transition, different personalities of being an auditor to this, and yeah, been pretty good road. Yeah.
And I mean, if you tapped out right now, you could say like, "Hey, I had a pretty well-rounded career." I mean, president, NAMAD, marketing nationally, graduated from Temple. All right, so let me jump into some of the questions, because one of the reasons I was super excited to talk to you is as a person who spent it seems like the majority of my adult years working in retail, primarily automotive retail. It's the goal of everybody who walks into a dealership at one day to have their name on the building. I mean, whether people want to vocalize it or not, every salesperson, every service person has said in their head, I want my name on that building, or at least bigger on my business cards, So, but there's a real disparity in minority ownership.
Yeah.
So can you frame that for us and tell us really how big that problem is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And even today, it's been probably the most widely known question that I get asked a lot. And I'll paint a picture in this way. Dealers, particularly minority dealers, we weren't allowed to become dealers until the post-civil rights movement, 67, 68, 66, 67, right? And so you look at just being able to have access in the mid 60s where the industry in of itself is over 100 years old. So there's like a 40 plus year head start for non-minorities having access and creating generational wealth, as to where we were able to have an initial starting point in the mid 60s. If you flash forward into mid 60s to 70s, we've had some minority dealers that were awarded opportunities to become dealers, but really not until the mid to late 70s when Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors created their minority dealer development programs, is when there was such a resurgence and push for minorities to have access and opportunities to become dealers, because they provided these programs, which were financing programs that allowed them to at least get their foot in the door.
So, and I mean, you bring up a really important point, because when you talk about family business, I'm not aware of a minority owned family business, generational in auto retail. And excuse me, I know you probably know of one, but I'm not personally aware of it. So I think what you bring up is a really good point in terms of that generational wealth and how that's passed on. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the biggest challenge you'd say minorities face on the road to dealership ownership?
The biggest challenge has always been capital and access to it. Mm-hmm. Our industry, as you know, requires so much capital, from a working capital standpoint to what the actual price is to purchase a dealership now is at an all-time high. You're looking at double-digit $1 million just to acquire a franchise. The entry point as well is to build a store from brick and mortar requires a significant amount of capital in the multi-million-dollar category. So it has been a challenge for us to be able to get access to that type of capital, because of the barrier of a price of entry is a lot significantly different from 100 plus years ago versus the mid 60s. So without those programs, to be honest, that were created by Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors back then, there really wouldn't be any minority dealerships today, as many as we have, although it's still not that many.
Multi-million dollars. Maybe that's why I never got my name on a building.
There's still hope, though. You need to talk to Damon.
That's right, man.
I mean, it still sits in the back of my mind when I go in for service somewhere and I look at a dealership. I'm like, man, I could run this.
You still can, though, Matt. Like it's not over, right? You got the right guy on the show right now. Yeah, but Damon, you talked about these programs. So from you're talking to Matt right now. Like, what programs would be available for him?
really the most consistent one since its creation is the General Motors Holding Program. And I think early on, I think back then General Motors probably required a liquid capital or unencumbered capital of about $100,000, and they would finance the remaining 85 to 90% of the store, and you would pay off that store or your loan with the General Motors by way of profits. Today, that program still exists. I believe you have to have about 10 or 15% of the work required capitalization of the store, and they will finance the remaining 80 to 85% of it. And you pay back with profits as well. You know, the key back from now to then is that originally when our I'll say NAMAD's founding fathers first got their stores, or those initial set of dealers that first got their stores, you know, they were put in places and given opportunities, right, that they had to fix other people's problems. So your expense structure, the location probably wasn't right where a person of color needed to be, but you inherited all of their problems. And so although it was financed by, you know, the OEM or their financial arm, you know, you were tasked to put into some points that were just coming in challenging and or not viable. And so flash forward to date, although they have corrected the challenges and issues of past or of old, you still see the challenge of now location, the point, and the opportunity, right? And everything still needs to be placed, and all these things need to line up. The sun and moon needs to line up to make sure that this store has some viability, has some sustainability, and that it's not in a market where the economic infrastructure of it is not deteriorating.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. I like, but the part about, you know, when people think about ownership, they don't necessarily think about like assuming somebody else's business, you know, the goods and the bads. They might just think of the goods, you know, not necessarily thinking about all the other things that come along with it. Let's say that I wanted to approach dealership ownership seriously this time. I'm being serious. What should I be doing what should I be doing if I'm at a dealership? What should I be doing to prepare myself for that eventuality? Like, what can I do ahead of time?
The first thing you need to do is, outside of your experience in the store, to see if the dealership owner who owns that store will sponsor you to attend NADA, National Automobile Dealers Association's Dealer Academy. That's really step one. You need some type of accreditation and some education background, at least put you into the different silos or different business entities within a dealership. Whether you're just a salesperson, it puts you in the service, puts you in the F&I, it puts you in the used cars. It gives you the whole 360 viewpoint of how that store, from a theory standpoint as well as practical standpoint, to understand that dealership, what its challenges are and what ways that you can improve it. So that's one of the really big key takeaways from the academy. I did graduate from the academy as well. That from what I've learned is that, you know, it's like a co-op at school, at a college. You go to class, you go back to work, and you kind of work on that area that you're learning in class during that time. So that's part one. I think part two, I advise people is, if you don't have the capital and you have to partner, watch who you marry, right? Sometimes marriages end in some horrible divorces, right? And everybody's intentions are not for the best interest of you. And I try to do that a lot with a lot of the athletes that we deal with, who want to get into the business from diversifying their income. That, you know, you may more than likely going to try to partner with the non-minority than the minority, but you need to at least know some basics on how to read the financial statement, know the basics of how each department works, and that's where one of the benefits of the academy helps you with.
What do you think are the biggest conceptions out there about owning a dealership. You know, Matt saying like, I want to own a dealership. I want my name on the building. But what is he not thinking about? And what should he be thinking about?
Matt, we're still in 2020. You may not want to put your name on that building. It's sad to say, right? And just to be as honest and upfront as possible, you will rarely see, in many cases within our dealer body, that they actually have their names on the building. Mm-hmm. That's just as real as I can be. And as unfortunate that is, most of our dealerships are not located in communities that are diverse communities. And so, I mean, although it sounds good to have your name in lights, sometimes it may not be the best business decision for you and your business to go down that road. And that's with a lot of, not just auto side, that's with a lot of businesses in and of itself that are not located in the community. But it does, we've seen some instances where it definitely has hurt the business.
Okay, we got to break that down, because I don't mean to act like Barbara Walters here, but I'm gonna ask you that tough question, because I'm reading between the lines. But are you saying that, you know, Matt, him being African American, and if people would know that, like, his name could hurt his business? Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying.
Yeah, it can hurt. Yeah. Or particularly where you're located, right? All depends on your geography. And again, most of the stores or metro stores are not owned by minorities. Where there are more populated people of color in those metro stores, most of those stores aren't owned by minorities. Most of our dealerships are in the rural areas or suburban areas.
And that's what you were saying in terms of when the manufacturer is granting this dealership location or spot to you, you know, you're not going to be in LA necessarily, or in DC like you, where, you know, there is a high percentage of minorities. You might be in an area where there's not much. So navigating that could be a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, you could be out in Calabasas, but you know, you're not where there's a majority population of people of color.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, but it's not just auto. There are a lot of businesses that face the same challenges. So, I mean, our industry, I think it's coming more and more. We're being more and more vocal about it. But you know, there's many dealerships in the LA area that are minority owned. You never know.
True.
And just to be fair, there's many non-minority dealerships that don't put their names on the sign as well. So you know, sometimes it's strategy, sometimes it is the best business practice. It's just best to keep the city and the name of the store out there.
Right. Yeah. Actually, there's a real popular chain of dealers out here. The name on it does not represent the name of the family that owns it, but that name has already been entrenched in the community. Why change it? It's already got recognition. So I could totally see that. But you know, the other layer of where the position of the dealership is something that's a misconception I hadn't considered. I figured I was just going to get a spot on Auto Row in Cerritos Auto Mall. Start off the big leagues at first.
Oh, no. So yeah, the manufacturer would dictate where that store needs to be. And that is one of the biggest myths, that you can just put one wherever you choose to put one. Or if you think there's a store that needs to take place or it needs to be in a certain geographic location, you can just get it and go place it there. And it's, you know, you have state franchise laws that have mile requirements or distance requirements there, but many instances, no, the manufacturer kind of dictates what geographic circle you're able to go in.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So of the dealers, like, you know, of the minority dealers that we do see, people who are granted dealerships and, you know, they get past the initial year or two of struggle and pain and strife, how do they end up faring, like as a whole? If you could make a blanket statement, how do they fare compared to their competitors?
Minority dealers in many instances are more profitable than non. Minority dealers, there's 19,000 dealerships, 1,243 ethnic minority dealerships. Many instances, minority dealers are more profitable and outperform non-minorities, including publics.
Wow.
Yes.
And what would Okay, now it's my Barbara Walters hat. So like my initial thought is like, minority dealership, this is one person. I'm just going to say it's a guy or a gal. This is that gal's focus. That's their only holding as far as like dealerships. They may not own 16 or something. So they could focus on that one. So all the energy and effort goes into it. That's my initial thought as to why it might outperform. But
Right.
is that anywhere near what it is, or is there other circumstances?
We don't really have we have a finite group of dealers that have, let's say, greater than 10 stores. Our average dealer body, they have 3 stores.
Okay.
So those 3 stores are more geographically located where they can touch them daily. So it helps us, or it helps them being able to mind their business better because they are there all the day, every day, to open and close those doors.
Right.
And so it's probably like, we are deemed small businesses, or dealerships are small businesses. And the importance of the small business is that they are all pillars in those communities.
Yeah.
Right. And so that owner who may not have his name on the building is known within that community as the owner. And so that helps the community keep its circle of life economically going, and keeps the little leagues and the Lions clubs and all of those other entities to survive.
Well, and it makes sense from, when you look at all the studies of diversity, and from a business standpoint, some of the most successful businesses are the most diverse businesses. And I think in part, I wonder also, are minority dealers in some ways better equipped to serve all? I mean, as a minority, I live in a white world. So I understand that. I understand white people, right? Because I work with them. My neighborhood has a lot of them. But the other advantage is I'm a Black woman. So, I could serve Black people and Black women, particularly, like in a way that is unique relative to someone else. So I wonder, is that part of it too?
I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
If you just look at our industry as a whole, or I'll start at consumer side. So last year, 2019, we probably sold about 14 million personal vehicle registrations out of the 17 million SAR, which include fleet. 30% of all new cars and trucks are purchased by an ethnic minority.
Mm-hmm. You said 30%.
30%.
Okay.
Wow.
Are purchased by an ethnic minority: African American, Asian, Native American, and Hispanic. Purchased by ethnic minorities. So that economic footprint is diversity, which, as our population continues to grow, that percentage will increase. So the scale is diversity is equal to growth, right? So if you want to grow, you have to embrace diversity. The difference is, I would say, the industry has a challenge or a problem that we need to fix collectively is the minority dealer body majority are the people that have the most diverse employees. We're more cognizant of it.
Yeah.
Where non-minority dealers may not intentionally be as cognizant of having diversity within those dealerships. Right. Particularly at the leadership level. And so you may have a leader that's in diversity versus a non-minority manager, and you'll see kind of like the people who you hire are more people that look like that leader. Yeah. And so for our community, I mean the minority community, we aspire to be like the leader. And if you don't see that there's an elevation opportunity to elevate to become that leader, then it's difficult for people of color to see that we could be like them. So it's I think it's a twofold piece in which we're urging all of the manufacturers to take a look at themselves within the C-suite, and also many of the other companies in our industry to take a look at the C-suites to see why there is a lack thereof. And in many instances, we're asking for those CEOs to come up with their vision of diversity. We've seen with everyone come out with the Black Lives Matter statements or tweets or Instagram posts, and so now we're holding a lot of them accountable to come up with their vision. And that vision needs to be more diverse, and it has to come from the leader, and it has to trickle down on how that leader will hold everyone accountable at the OEM level, even at the dealership level as well, if they see that there is a problem or that there's something that they want to fix.
So we got to touch on that a little bit in terms of diversity. And, there's probably somebody watching right now who works in one of, a vendor or works in auto retail, and they're saying, I want diversity. It just doesn't happen. They don't apply. Or, when they do work here, they don't stay. I want more African Americans, or I want more, various minorities. I want more Latinos. I want more women, whatever it might be from a diversity standpoint, but they don't apply here or they don't stay. What would your advice to them be?
Wow. The other one that you mentioned is that they can't find one.
Yeah.
Right. So
one.
you can't find one. There's one. So
yeah. Hopefully more than one.
More than one. And so you're looking at, we tend to do what we want to do, or what we say we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not actively looking, or if one dealer who's a non-minority dealer called me and says, well, I've hired a guy and he was with me all these years and I trained him, and then he left. He left me, Damon. He left me. And I said, well, this is a true story. Like last week.
He found the one guy.
One guy. And I said, well, he probably didn't see himself being at your level.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought about it. He says, well, why? He says, well, because you probably have a group of people already that are at that level who are probably nudging him and telling him that he didn't never have an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So he will leave to get to a level where he thinks he should be or she be.
Mm-hmm.
It may not been you. It may be your managers that were preventing that individual to have this vision that you had or see in that person. I said, so because there was no one like him at the level where you are,
what do you aspire to?
What do you aspire to?
Yeah, it's like one of the things that you said that I love when you talk about and I don't think people fully grasp this. You were talking about the future is growth, right? Or the growth, the growth is minority, right? And so I think what people sometimes get caught up in when the diversity conversation starts is why, right? Let everybody earn their own spot and so forth and so on. And, everybody should just grab it. But it's not just because, from what I'm seeing, from what I'm hearing from you, is you're not saying it's just the right thing to do. It makes business sense because this is where the growth opportunity is. These are the sections of our community that are growing. So diversity isn't just so that you can, check a box or, feel good about your tweet. It's also because it's going to help you grow your business, because that's also what's growing. Am I understanding that right?
You nailed it 100%. That's right.
I think that conversation needs to be held a little bit more for people who don't and I'm not saying it's people who are, have ill intentions. I'm just saying people who don't necessarily understand the reason for it. It's also tied to growth in business.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of it is intentional. I think you don't look at the data.
Mm-hmm.
And the data tells you where your market is going if you pay attention to it, right? Mm-hmm. You want to look at the 30% market that's growing, or you want to stay with that 70%? And sometimes it's easy to just stick with what you know.
Yeah.
Because this 30%, you really don't know. You don't know, right? But when you look at our industry, every vehicle has a diverse feel, look, the way the speakers sound, everything we have. We are innovators as it relates to the way things look, the clothing, the sound on speakers, from even just what Chrysler was able to do with Beats. They realized that people like sound.
Yeah.
Right. We like the way, or when you first brought your first car, first thing you do, crank up that radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so that all comes from I don't want to use the term urban to be urban, but it comes from the diverse group.
Mm-hmm.
We are leaders in that, but people aren't looking at it at that from that shade of lens.
Right.
Well, and it's interesting because a couple weeks ago we had a general manager from downtown LA, Chrysler Dodge Jeep, and he's a white guy from San Diego. Think about like flip flops, and that's when he grew up on the beach. And then he took over this downtown LA dealership, and we asked him like, well, how did you acclimate to downtown LA coming from San Diego in the beach? And one of the things he said was, I moved into the community first. I moved into downtown LA. I understood my population, which was a very high percentage of minorities, especially Hispanic community.
Right.
And he immersed himself in that community. And then when you looked at that store, they had, concerts with, Hispanic singers that were well known for that community. And Matt, they had a restaurant that had like kind of like that fruit.
That's very popular in that community. They
exactly
teamed up with insurance and radio stations because this person was exactly what you would hope for. Is like, I want to understand this demographic of people that I'm not as familiar with, coming from Surf City, San Diego.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's an important lesson for not just, obviously the value is to have more minority dealers, but it's also, if you're not a minority, for you to understand your market, and hopefully your dealership, the employee and the staff and those demographics match your customers.
Match your customers. So if I think you're talking about the store in Figueroa.
Yes, that's the one.
That store used to be minority owned.
Really?
It was
Did not know that.
It was owned by a Hispanic. He lost the store as a result of the Chrysler bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And that store switched hands a couple times, but it is right to your point. It is right there. That whole block of Figueroa.
Yes.
Probably one of the most diverse areas probably in downtown LA.
Yeah, that's for certain.
And so if you want to be able to attract good people, you got to have people from that community.
Yeah.
And he was tapping into that. I mean, Snoop Dogg concerts, monster truck shows. I mean, just stuff that was like very,
community.
Knew exactly how to target that particular market.
Wow, kudos to him.
They're doing really well.
Yeah, that is cool.
Your mind is like a information trap.
Yes.
Pretty much dealership from the other part of the country. You're 3 hours away, 3,000 miles away, and you're like, oh yeah, they got the 10-foot windows in the front.
That store, I remember that store so vivid because that was the first jewel box store. Because it was where Fiat first came in with the jewel box over there. That's how I remember that.
Hey, Matt, when you put your application in for your dealership, you are going to get a call from Damon. They will call him first before you even get to the second level.
So I better make a really good impression here. All right. Well, okay. So let me ask you another question, if I may. Okay. So once an owner, what unique challenges, besides not necessarily because you can't control where your rooftop's going to be, right? So not necessarily understanding your community or not, matching the community. But what unique challenges would you say that owners of color are faced with that maybe the wider dealer body isn't? I know you said access to capital.
The overall expense structure is different. Mm-hmm. So if you have someone that just got their store in the area, well, let's say Open Point, they had to build it up, and you're their first store, your expenses are going to be significantly different than that third or fourth generation dealer next door to you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right.
And so if you look at it, let's go back to during the recession. One of the biggest problems, we lost about 40% of our dealer body because of the fact that, outside of the GM Chrysler piece, was capital and expenses. They don't own their land. They're still, most of our dealers, 90% of our dealers are still in their first 30-year mortgage.
Yeah, Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
take that part into play. You take interest rates are completely different, and from at all levels of lending, because the lack of banking relationships, and the amount of capital that is required. We're not going to put over capitalize a store. We're barely getting in when we get in.
Mm.
So, in some cases, right? And so you're looking at the playing field is not necessarily, it's not level from the expense structure. So our expenses have to be as tight as possible, because we can't afford any bump in interest rates for floor plan loans, or bump if you got a floating mortgage. You can't afford that cushion. Or when there's a downturn, one of the biggest things I saw through the recession is that a lot of non-minority multi-generational dealers were able to pull the equity out because they already owned it.
Right.
But our guys, we weren't able to pull anything out because they just owned it. So that was one of the like real eye-opening things for me, what I experienced during that time. And even it just still lasts today, but the expense structures are definitely different from a single store. And that can be non-minority as well, versus a dealer group that has, 5 to 6 stores. So the competitiveness from a marketing standpoint, and the competitiveness of getting good people.
Because you're also new. You don't have like you don't have a reputation to lean on.
You don't have the reputation, but now you can be a good store, but there's a lot of people who rather go work for the guy that has 6 stores versus single point guy,
Sure.
because you have this, you have this mental thing that, hey, bigger is better. I got more access,
Right.
but the same store.
Right.
So we have a people issue trying to attract people to those types of stores, particularly when you have larger groups surrounding you.
So, what about the individual salesperson in automotive retail, or the sales manager? They're up and coming in their career. They're not necessarily a general manager or an owner. What kind of support does NAMAD provide for that person that's kind of up and coming in their career?
So if you're in the sales or used car sales, we do have a member category. We call them dealer candidates.
Okay.
And those dealer candidates are not actual dealers or owners of stores or partners within the dealership, but they aspire to become a dealer. And that also falls for athletes, actors, and everyone else goes under that category. And so we provide a network for them and some resources just for them to either, whatever level they are in, that for them to learn the business. And in many instances, for that one salesperson, maybe a blue chip salesperson, if the owner doesn't recognize that person will start to seek employment elsewhere, right? Because that's their goal. One of the challenges that I really noticed, Carrie, at the conference last year is that we had about 4 or 5 people fired when they got back from the conference because they found out that they were there.
They didn't want them to take the time off.
Their time to better themselves on their nickel, but the thought that you're going to leave me to go get your own store because you went over there to them is more of those things like, okay, if he wants to, from an employer standpoint, you see someone wants to better themselves on their own, that's the guy you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
You just need to mold that and put some energy into that person, because that's the blue chipper you want. But in some instances, you look at it as a threat versus a benefit. And so, it's unfortunate those guys are now, they're doing pretty well, afterwards being terminated. But it's definitely something that I have to be cognizant of when we get back to face-to-face meetings, because we do allow. One of the things at NAMAD conference, manufacturers interview with dealers or candidates who were inspired to become a dealer. It's the only time it happens in anywhere where we bring the manufacturers to us and they interview to meet particular potential candidates. No one else does that.
Wow.
Yeah, that part of the conference, that's amazing to have that opportunity.
And it's like speed dating, though.
Yeah,
But
it's quick, but but still to have that exposure. And I think the other thing that what I loved about NAMAD, and this is just coming from a vendor, I'm not selling cars, but if I was, I'd be even more inspired by the fact that I just have never been to a conference where there were minorities or people that look like me. I mean, literally, it was like a life-changing event to go to a conference and actually see myself.
Yeah.
And so I can't even imagine what that's like for somebody who is in automotive retail and being able to interact with owners of dealers that are minorities. I mean, I hate to even like sound so surprised, but I think the impact of that is you get to see yourself and to really see what's possible.
yeah, to your point, and thank you for the compliment. And it's unique because we are a melting pot, and so Matt, one of the parties that I throw is at this nightclub.
Oh, that was fun.
Okay, tell me more.
So
Don't share too much though, Damon, because they might not let me go. TrueCar is going to be like, what? This was going on at NAMAD?
This is like our last night, so
yes,
a relaxed night. And one of the beautiful things about it is, like, I've had Little John, I've had Rev Run, and it's like a melting pot, minority people, minority folks, and it is definitely like a family reunion. But people are all having a good time, enjoying themselves, and you really don't realize that, hey, majority of the people here are all minorities.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they're conducting business, but you start to build that relationship and camaraderie within an intimate setting. And that's one of the benefits that we bring to the table.
I mean, when I think of that conference, I mean, I was in automotive retail for 12 years in a relatively diverse part of the country, Southern California. And, I made it to sales manager. And at the level of sales manager, I actually, in 12 years, I never met anybody or I never worked with anybody who was above my level that looked like me, right? So I've never, I never worked with a black GSM. I never worked with a black GM. I never had a, black, not even finance director. So to go to I'm imagining going to an event like this and being like,
that's exactly what
where y'all in? I mean, it's
what Carrie said too. Carrie said, what is this? I've never seen anything like this before.
Wait, when the electric slide broke out at the party, I didn't know what to do with myself. I've been to all kinds of automotive parties. I've been to NADA for 20 years. Like, I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know whether to join in or not. There was part of me that didn't want to join in. You know what I'm saying? Even though I love dancing.
It's like, hey, but you got to jump in. But
jump in.
But what we spoke about earlier, though, is seeing something to aspire to. That's one thing that I think that's overlooked in our society is why representation is so important. How do you know you can do it if you've never seen it? There's some people who are going to go out there and kick the walls down and they're going to set the world on fire, right? We already know that they exist. But for your average aspiring human who isn't made of fire, you might need to see somebody similar who traveled down a similar path. And that, like, I think that experience is lacking. That's why one of the reasons, again, I'm so excited to have you on the show is so that we could talk about it, because I feel comfortable saying Southern California, if I haven't seen it, I understand if you work in an area that's not as densely populated. I get it. But SoCal? And I know there's going to be a lot of people coming at me and saying, hey, I'm a this, or I know this, or not. And I'm not saying this to poke holes. I'm just saying I didn't come across it in my time. So I think it's super valuable. So
so we're urging some of the interviews that I've done in print and in video, and we've sent the letters out to all of the OEMs, just saying that if you want, and diversity is important to you, you need to start to recruit where minorities are populated, and let's start to get people at the ground level. We started this career in automotive program, which we visit HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities.
That's great.
And I bring at least 5 or 6 OEMs and a vendor, and we stay about 2 days and we tear it up.
Really?
And because they don't have access.
Right.
Yes.
No one knows at some of these schools that there's, they look at car dealers, they think about the guy with a checkered shirt trying to smoke cigarettes and trying to sell a car. Not that you can be the owner, not that you can be an F&I manager, not that you can be a service tech and make 6 figures, not that you can work at an OEM, at the plant, all of these other venues and avenues that our industry provides. We have every major in every college within auto at all levels. You can touch everything from HR to engineering. Everything is in auto. And so we've been able to we've done about 10 so far.
Wow.
And it's exposing these schools and these students to these schools. And my goal when I set it up was the OEMs don't recruit there.
Yeah.
So if I can bring you to them and you can see that there's this talent that's just raw, and you can start to say, hey, why are we not going to Clark, Atlanta?
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And that's being deliberate. And I think that, you think about diversity programs and where they go wrong, or just companies in general and where they go wrong is it's not as intentional as it should be. And I think that action of let's go to the historical Black colleges and let's have a career fair, or let's educate them even on just the automotive industry, because I meet people all the time, whether it be my Uber driver, even someone in a drive-through that is just great from a customer service. I feel like I'm always recruiting to automotive. Like you'd be really good in the BDC. Like the way you just dealt with me, you'd be great over the phone. But a lot of people they're shocked when I bring it up, and minorities in particular. They don't think necessarily about the automotive industry. And there's so much opportunity. And let's just be honest, the barrier to entry is low too. I mean, you can enter automotive without a PhD and end up becoming a general manager that makes $400,000-$500,000 a year. So it's important that you're doing that and targeting these students.
When I talk about the service, being a service tech or master tech to a lot of students, even at the high school level here in this area. And once I say, hey, you're really an electrical engineer that specializes in auto, can make $200,000, $300,000. And it blows. No one thinks.
They don't think about it.
They don't think about that. And I'm like, you're not getting dirty. You just got a computer, you plug up and you dissect and it tells you what to do. Boom, boom. And so once people start to think about it, they want, okay, well, how do I get access? Or how can I see it actually? So the program that we've been doing for these past 10 has definitely opened not only the eyes for these students, but also the eyes of these manufacturers that have been going. That just have been blown away with the quality of talent that these young adults are bringing to the table.
That's great. That's great. Well, we're going to wrap it soon, but I want to ask you one more question, Matt. You might have the last question as well, but are you satisfied at the progress we've made? Because I think about that sometimes just as a Black woman, and I think about like history, and I think about how thankful I am relative to my parents who, were adults during the civil rights movement, or my grandparents, or my great grandfather who was a slave. Like I think about all of them and I go, wow, have I come so far? Like I would blow their minds if they only knew, what was possible, or what their ancestors would achieve. But at the same time, I'm equally frustrated that like we're having some of the same conversations as it comes to race relations. So thinking about you and all the work you've done in terms of diversity in automotive, are you satisfied? And if you're not, what do you want to see change?
Quick answer is no, right? And to your point, when you look at when the starting line was 40 years ahead from where you were actually be able to take off, that's tough. So our progress, although there has been some over the past 40 years, I would be lying that we didn't know there's 1,400 minority dealerships. Until there is a consistent effort, a consistent vision, but the vision has to be reduced to writing. And then they have to come up with the strategy to execute. That's my ask right now. While everyone is open-minded, right? And now for some reason, this diversity thing is like just happened. And I'm like, hey, we've been preaching about this, or other groups, we've been talking about this for years. This is what we do. If we can get you to start thinking differently, but you got to reduce it to writing now. And within our industry, as you know, our CEOs switch from manufacturer to manufacturer like every 2 to 3 years. And every time for us, and particularly my job, it makes it worse because I got to start all over again. Even though you know me,
Yeah,
I got to start all over to then preach the business case.
Yeah.
Present the business case to it. So I think ultimately, if we can get everyone, as many of the OEMs as possible, to start to look at things, come up with the vision, be able to hold people with set some attainable goals, hold people accountable, then I think we'll constantly start to move that needle. And at all levels, whether it's employment, advertising, whether it's in supplier diversity, even within the dealership ranks, that starts to help us move the needle.
wow. Well, I got one more for you. No, it's an easy one. It's an easy one. Because first, I want to thank you again. I can't tell you how. I think we're being very sincere when we say thank you for being on the show.
Man, I appreciate having me. Thank you.
But I can't let you leave without this one. We had mentioned earlier, Carrie had asked, like, what resources do you have for like a salesperson or maybe a sales manager who's not at the top level, but they want to, move up. And you mentioned some resources. How would somebody find them? Like, where do they need to go to look for these resources?
We just launched our website. The new website should be up and running right now, namad.org, www.namad.org. There are some of those things mentioned on there now.
Okay.
But a lot of it, being as though we're in this COVID, is through our webinar series, we're touching on different topics and areas. For example, I just interviewed Bishop T.D. Jakes. I interviewed Steve Harvey. Interviewed Soledad O'Brien. We got a couple more coming up that are pretty heavy hitters. But it's kind of what we bring to the table in our industry, right? So we don't just focus on our industry is such a silo. I'll bring outsiders in to just we're not all in this alone.
Yeah.
The entertainment industry has the same problem as we do. From what Steve Harvey shared with us. Bishop Jakes gave some examples of even the things that he's had to pivot and change because of COVID within his realm, and the importance of being able to diversify. So we started to touch on different subjects, different topics with some key people that everyone knows and recognizes that can bring a message of not necessarily auto, but just being business minded, being able to reinvent yourself right now, which we all have had to do. Even if you're a salesperson, there's no more person to person sales. We're all digital or we're virtual. We all have to do things differently than what we've historically been able to do. And so those are on our site now. But we will keep pushing forward for those types of guys.
So, and I just have to point out, Damon looks, he has a nice shirt on. He looks like a smart, simple man. But then he throws out these names as if they're just my friend TD Jakes, and then Steve Harvey, was over yesterday. What about Soledad? You're the most connected person that I know of in automotive. I'm just saying, how's your circle surrounded by these celebrities?
I have no idea, but you know what? I've got a lot of good friends from some other places, but it's so funny that you mentioned that. I'm like, it's just them. Yeah.
Oprah will be on next week. She was just at my house this morning. I love it. But no, listen, for everyone watching, if you don't know Damon Lester, hopefully you've gotten to know him better on this Industry Insider show. But he's somebody to know in the industry beyond the minority community. He's an influencer in the business. So Damon, thank you so much for being on. We learned so much from you.
Thank you, TrueCar. You guys are the best.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Damon. We'll catch you later. Matt, I gotta say, sometimes you're so proud of your connection. So one, TrueCar has always been a proud sponsor of NAMAD, and we're really proud of that. But I'm just proud to know Damon, and I'm proud you know him now.
Yeah, I am too. What a fantastic dude, and what a fantastic organization. You know, and I think it's so great because you could be concerned that somebody, NAMAD might feel like it's only inclusive of a certain particular group, but that's not the case. It seems to be minority, non-minority. Let's just make the business better. Here's some things that people need to focus on. I'm so glad we got to have him on the show. Learned so much from him today.
Absolutely. And if you want to start a dealership, you're set to go. I mean, you got some good advice on that. So
what was your key takeaway, if you had one? What was your key takeaway?
Oh, wow. I think, I feel like one of the things that I think was very important that he talked about is efficiencies. And it's just something that I think we've talked a lot about at TrueCar and just the industry in general, about having to be more efficient. And as particularly as a minority dealer, having to focus on those efficiencies. You don't have time to waste money, on marketing and on operations and process. Like, you have to be really dialed in because you don't have that competitive advantage of generations and generations, behind you. So I think that was the big one. What about you?
Well, when he said unable to attain dealerships until after the civil rights movement, I was thinking of dealerships that I had actually worked at that had been founded in the 50s, right? And I never gave it any thought. Like, wait, huh? So it's not that necessarily my grandfather didn't want to open a dealership. He couldn't have, right? Like, these are the things that, like, that was just mind blowing. I almost fell off my chair because I had never connected those two, like the timing and the difference, like how that's laddered up to where we're at right now.
Absolutely.
And
we got to know remember our history, because it's that, it still affects today.
When something else that he said that kind of really stabbed me was when he was talking about the people who had gone to the NAMAD conference last year and then were released from their jobs. Right. And it didn't surprise me, because I know people who are in automotive who don't use LinkedIn, for example. And I ask them, why aren't you on LinkedIn? And they say, well, I don't want my boss thinking that I'm looking for a job. When their real goal is just to network and meet more people and learn information. But the fear of suspecting that I'm going to be leaving for something else stops me from, maybe getting more education and I when he said that, I was like, oh, I could totally see that.
Yeah, we got to change that mentality, because if you want to grow superstars, you got to let them grow, and that might even be at the risk of losing them, right? But the point is, you want a superstar, you're going to have to nurture them, and going to conferences, getting education is a huge part of that. So no, I agree that was a big one as well. So, but I also think what stood out to me is just the opportunity that despite all these challenges, there are opportunities. There's people like Damon, there's NAMAD, there's these organizations this organization that is supporting minorities who want to go after this. So there's a lot of challenges, but there still is opportunity.
Absolutely. And it was like, it's part of growth.
Yes.
You will eventually end up making more business and be more successful if you embrace diversity. If for nothing else, you'll make money doing it.
It's a business decision. So well, let's wrap up. We've gone over, but it's good. This is good content. I want to remind you all that if you want to check out this interview or other interviews, they're going to be posted on the TrueCar dealer blog, TrueCar.com/dealer blog. Also, if you're interested in anything related to TrueCar, you can go to TrueCar.com/dealer and learn about our program and our products. So thank you so much, Matt. It was great to be on with you again.
My pleasure, Carrie. As usual. So I'm so excited. We'll do this again next week, right?
Yes. See you guys next Tuesday. Bye, everyone.
Bye.